Hi, this is Ted Goldsboro with Living History, and today we're continuing our conversation with Frank Weer, talking about railroading and Frank's career working for the railroads. And so we'll get back to Frank Weer. Frank, when you were a kid, you used to live in part of your childhood in Gladwyne. Your father worked for the Philadelphia Country Club, and you go down Lafayette Road. And what was down at the end of Lafayette Road? What kind of railroad was down there?
Well, it was a freight railroad. It was the main line of the Reading Railroad, and it was all mostly steam trains at the time, and they were rather photogenic, and I had just gotten started taking photographs, so this was an attraction. And also they did switching there in this fair-sized yard called Wood Lane, and it could hold about 1,000 cars, I think.
Wow.
And it was, you know, sort of a, well, being, you know, in the out in the country at that time, and it was sort of an entertainment, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Before television.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I did my own developing and printing, and so it all fitted in.
Wow.
And of course it was mainly on the summer that I did this. But,
okay. Now, before we had digital cameras, how did the cameras work?
Well, you had to load it with film, and you had to have a camera that had a lens that and a shutter speed that you could take some moving objects that otherwise you just got a blur, you know, but they're out of focus to some degree.
And then what would you do with the film?
Well, you'd bring it home, take it in the dark room, and take it out of the camera, and put it in the chemical baths, and the developer, then the stop bath, and then the fixer, and then you'd wash it. It was quite a time-consuming process.
In the dark, too.
In the dark, yeah. The printing, or I mean the
developing.
Right.
The
printing of the prints you could do with a yellow, a very faint yellow light.
Did you have an enlarger?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that enabled you to
make at least. Well, I could make it up to 8 by 10 prints.
And where did you buy those?
Again, where I got the camera at Williams, Brown and Earl in Philadelphia. That was a very interesting old place for photographers. And of course now it's all gone, and now we have Ritz camera that replaced it. But anyhow,
there's been I guess it's true with many occupations, but photography used to offer jobs to a lot of people. There were people who you'd drop your film off at the drugstore or the camera shop, and there were people who developed those. There were studios, I guess, in Philadelphia maybe. And
there were some right here in Ardmore.
Were there some? Oh, yeah. And Bob Schwartz had a camera shop on Lancaster Avenue for 49 years. And when digital cameras started to come in, then people weren't bringing their film in to be developed anymore. And
that's right. Yeah. I was on a trip with him in about 1950. They went to Hershey, and they took photographs of the Rose Queen in the Rose Garden at Hershey.
Wow. Wow. Now, Frank, I think you said that the Reading was a freight line.
Well,
when you were a kid.
Yeah, well, where I lived it was.
Okay.
The passengers were all on the other side of the river.
Okay.
It went through Conshohocken and
out to Norristown.
To Norristown, and on up to the coal areas, Reading, Pottsville, Shamokin, Sunbury, and all the way to Williamsport at that time.
But before it was a freight line, or while it was a freight line, it was also...
Yeah. Well, it was passengers until roughly the First World War, and of course until the turn of the century, there was no connection of any consequence at Norristown to cross the river. So they had to come out of Callowhill Street, Broad and Callowhill, later Reading Terminal, and go up the train, the express train, the through trains went up the west side of the river, that stopped at Gladwyne, which was Rose Glen before Gladwyne, and the letters on the side of the building indicate that. Telegraph.
What's RO?
Call letters for the telegraph.
Okay.
And of course, that's the old name, Rose Glen, and that was abandoned in 1933. That and the Wood Lane station, but that was for freight. They still had an agent for freight there until the Depression. That's all. But
could you tell me what starting from, say, City Avenue and going out to Conshohocken, West Conshohocken, could you name me the stations that the Reading had?
Sure. Originally there was one at the city line, or county line, whatever you want to call it. Pencoed, West Manayunk, Gladwyne, Wood Lane, and then West Conshohocken.
And they all had stations?
And they all had stations, yeah, with agents. Yeah, I mean, and there were so many people. I mean, at one time, even the Little Reading Railroad had about 30,000 employees. I mean, it's unbelievable. They finally went, before it went out of business, there was about 5,000 of us left, something like that. But
now, we're recording this show on April the 1st in 2011, but could you tell me what's significant about April?
April the 1st, 35 years ago, all these old companies, Reading, and at that time Penn Central, Central Railroad of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Penn Central, New Haven, and various other lines, Western Maryland, and Ann Arbor, and a couple of others that I can't remember. But they all were taken into what was called Consolidated Rail Corporation, that started on April 1, 1976. And it was a total new experience, and it was huge at the time. It was almost 100,000 people they took in.
And you were working for them?
Yeah, that's right, until 1990, and then by that time there was only 25,000 left. Wow. It was a terrible attrition. I mean, yes, it did make money, but at an awful cost to employment, and also they sold off they abandoned at least half of the lines, and they were all sold off as a piece of real estate, and now in some cases they've had to put them back in again. They're working on it.
Frank, when you worked for the Reading, where was your office? In
Reading Terminal. I was in Reading Terminal for 13 years, on the 5th floor. And now, of course, it's a hotel. In fact, I asked the person on duty there for the Marriott, I said, can I go up to the 5th floor and see what my old office looks like? And of course, it's totally changed. You couldn't tell what it...
Now, toward the end of your career, were you still doing draftsmanship?
To some degree, yeah. Yeah. Well, it was varied over the years. Of course, I worked for the real estate department. We would do property surveys, property descriptions, and we on the Reading we even had the which is now the Reading Terminal Market. I had to make out leases for the different stalls in the market,
Oh.
which still exists, you know.
Before you did this, was that a market?
Yes, oh, absolutely.
old-time
It
market.
started from when they built Reading Terminal. That was an agreement between the farmers and the railroad. That's how they got the property. It was a farmers market from 1860 until 93.
Wow.
And the farmers said, well, we'll sell it to you, but you've got to have a space for us. And that's why they were under the train shed.
Well, it's a good thing it continued.
Yeah, right.
Now, Frank, we're getting short on time here.
Yeah.
I kind of have a reverse order. I think you told me that you started to work in railroading in the Pensy.
Yes.
And then you went to the Reading.
Right.
Well, we've already discussed the Reading. Let's go back to the Pensy.
Yeah, okay. And that's, that's Kinwood. Yeah.
And you didn't have much to do
with
Kinwood.
Except I did ride over the line once. Several times, actually. It was a very interesting route to take out to Conshohocken when it ran there. And sometimes we'd go from Center City to Conshohocken and then go home from there.
How did the railroad get over the Schuylkill River?
Well, on this big concrete bridge there, it's still there. No track on it, but and that was built around the time of the First World War.
Okay.
Actually, the line was opened in 1885, which I guess is about the date of the station.
That's
somewhere
right.
Around
Yeah,
there.
around 1890. I think.
Okay.
Now, I just put this in to show.
Well, that's the main line there at Narberth. Originally,
the Pensy.
Yes, originally built by the state in 1850. That stop was called Elm, and then there was another. A Victorian style station. Of course, that one's all changed and a new modern one.
Instead of using wooden railroad ties.
Now, they're all concrete
ties
and welded rail.
Welded rail. Now we're out of Bryn Mawr.
Bryn Mawr, that's the old enclosed substation at Bryn Mawr for the original electrification in 1915.
Okay.
And
there was a siding there, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, they still do run a local out to Bryn Mawr and cross it back over, but in the old days they actually had a pocket track there that they could store it on until the next schedule back to Philadelphia.
And what's this building?
And that's the interlocking tower at Bryn Mawr, out of service. It's not used anymore. It's all controlled from 30th Street. Okay. And eventually, a tower, they're obsolete. The whole thing will eventually be controlled, as I mentioned, from 30th Street.
Now, Frank, would you believe that we're out of time?
Yeah.
But I've certainly enjoyed your being part of this program and sharing your knowledge, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Until next time, this is Ted Goldsboro with Living History.